From Ticker, this is Black Belt Leader. Here's Karen Gately.
Welcome to Black Belt Leader. I'm Karen Gately, founder of Corporate Dojo. On the show today, we'll be discussing culture-driven governance. Later in the program, our resident legal guru, Glen Bartlett from Bartlett Workplace, will be here. But first, we're joined by Jeremy Duffield, who's the co-founder of Super Ed and former managing director of Vangaurd Investments in Australia. Most importantly, Jeremy is my former boss, and so I know from many years of working together, he has a great deal of wisdom to share on how we create the types of culture that lead to people doing the right thing. So Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Great to work with you, Karen.
Thank you. It's been a while. Great to have you back.
It's been a while, but it was a highlight of my career working with you.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Thank you. I think anybody who's ever spoken to me about my passions for leadership will have heard me talking about you as well and our partnership, and how we really did link arms for a number of years there to create an environment that I think, really did showcase that it's possible to get people to behave responsibly and to care about the outcome.
Well, we were creating a new company from scratch, and we need to set the values and get the team working as a team. And you really played an important role in helping me do that.
Thank you. So obviously you grew up in the Vangaurd group.
Yep.
So, whilst we were in startup mode here in Australia, you had already had a long career and upbringing in that organisation. Privileged to be working with the founder, Jack Bogle. Help us to understand what you really learned in those formative years, well before you landed back here in Australia. Yeah. What was the Vangaurd Group's lessons around culture that you remember?
Yeah, I spent 16 years with Vangaurd in the US, and really I learned all my basic business lessons at Vangaurd at the knee of Jack Bogle, the founder of Vangaurd. And he was just a remarkable person. He was called the guy who made most difference to American investors in the 20th century.
Yeah, wow.
And I think he did. And as far as running an organization, he built a company with a really strong vision of what it was trying to do, a really strong mission. And it was very easy, actually, to get excited about that mission because it was all about helping individual clients to achieve great things. And really differentiating the company from clients by doing the right thing on behalf of the clients.
Yeah, and that's what I remember noticing right from the get-go. Is it really was about our customer. We weren't just talking about that Mr. Bogle had set out on a mission to make sure that mums and dads investors were well looked after, and our organisation needed to deliver on that. What are some of the things that you believe Vangaurd leaders did to really help the rest of the organisation to buy into that mission, to understand what is our purpose?
Well, they really had to lead by example, by following Vanguard's values around client centricity and doing the right things by clients. So keep on making the company better and better all the time by focusing on continual improvement, never being complacent about where we were, even if we were growing dramatically, never being happy with that, always thinking that we could do better on behalf of clients.
I remember being told we're in a constant state of dissatisfaction.
That's right.
Yes, we're able to celebrate, and importantly, critically, we need to celebrate the right things, but let's just keep challenging ourselves. And I remember you and I having conversations where we were comparing our staff survey results with the average out there, and I remember you saying to me, I don't care what the average is, that's not the benchmark. The benchmark is an internal one of our own potential to be excellent. So certainly, again, live that under your leadership. So how does the Vangaurd Group make sure that their leaders understand how to influence culture?
Well, back in the day, I think it was really by picking the right people to start with. So hiring the right people who understand what you're trying to do, and then focusing on mission and making sure everyone understands that and everyone is on board, aligned, moving in the same direction.
Absolutely.
And then recognizing that there is a right way to do things, and the simple rule Jack Bogle taught was do the right thing, and if you don't know what the right thing is, ask your supervisor.
That's right. And again, just tap into that moral
that.
compass, what feels right, and if you're not certain, go and ask the questions. So obviously we've seen in Australia, the Banking Finance Royal Commission, the endless examples of poor conduct that have clearly had flow-on impacts to customers, to the marketplace. As an observer of that, what do you think some of the things that have caused that? What's gone wrong? What has allowed our financial institutions to behave with a lack of integrity?
Yeah. Well, clearly misalignment of incentives was important root cause. And I think the industry, through the Future of Financial Act, actually did a lot to address that. But ultimately, we didn't handle the transition well. We really blew the transition to a post-commission world.
Okay.
None of the industry or the regulators handled that well. As a result, we got the Royal Commission.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of good intent there, and in fact, Australia has moved, in some ways, further than much of the rest of the world in going to a post-commission world.
Okay. And what are some of the signs of that? What's some of the positive change you do see?
Well, basically that commissions will soon be gone, and that this removes the misalignment of incentives that has plagued the industry for a while. So I think that's a good regulatory step in the right direction, and I think management change will come, and I think values will change to a much more client-focused world, because the essence of financial services is actually about establishing trust.
That's right.
It's about trust.
Absolutely.
And that's what Jack Bogle taught me. And you can't create a good financial service company if you can't build trust with clients.
Totally agree. And you know, one of the CEOs that was caught up in that whole scenario was quoted as saying to a member of their executive team, who was challenging some conversation decision making, temper your sense of justice. And you are the first person I thought of when I heard that. I can't even imagine you tolerating that.
Yeah, no, we've got to stick up for the clients, and you know, whether you're a board member or a leader in the organisation, you've got to have a sense of justice and think through what's the right thing for the client.
Yeah. Absolutely. So again, you know, your advice to CEOs out there who really want to make sure that, you know, governance is just that foundation, making sure we are doing the right things. So we've got the checks and balances. You know, what are some of the steps that they can take to really make sure that that's happening in their organisation?
Yeah. Well, look, I think they have to lead by example. That's the first thing. It's not enough, but you have to lead by example. So set the right tone. Talk about what our customer values are and how we're going to get that across, and how we're going to win the hearts and minds of the customer, and recognize that it's in their self-interest to do so, because retaining clients is actually the secret to success in financial services.
Yeah.
So you've got to earn them, you've got to win them, and then you've got to retain them.
Yeah.
And so point out how building trust and how good governance can lead to good client relations, good corporate trust, can benefit the organisation.
Yeah.
It just set things in alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, again, from your experience around making it work, what about the role of accountability? You know, what do you see as making the biggest difference to make sure people are held accountable to the expectations that are set?
Well, you've got to be willing to reward and to punish when necessary. And punish means having honest conversations, as well as at the right point taking the right decision and making what may be a hard decision and moving someone along. But I remember many cases at Vangaurd there was just no tolerance for poor behaviour, behaviour that didn't set the cultural mindset.
Absolutely. Again, you know, I recall being able to go to any of the offices that I was lucky enough to go and visit, and there was a consistency in the way those various offices around the globe felt, you know, from a culture perspective. And often what I hear people say, oh, it's too hard when it's a big business to drive the culture, it gets out of control. And my response to all of that is, I've seen Vangaurd do it, so no excuses. How did they do that, do you think, around the world?
One of the other things I think was key, and you actually epitomise this, it's that culture of positivism, which is to some extent a US characteristic, but it was exemplified by Vangaurd leadership. Jack Bogle, his successors, all were tremendously positive about how they tried to build a culture. And so it was a can-do culture, and I think we need more of that in Australia.
Totally
so
agree.
when you get the opportunity to work in that type of environment, you either respond, that's too rah-rah for me, and many of our people did, you remember?
Yeah, they were a little freaked out.
And then they got used to it. And then they got to love it, I think.
Oh, they did. They absolutely did.
And they came on board, but having that positive sense of what we can do and why we're doing it makes all the difference.
Absolutely.
And I think it can really be a way to get a team motivated,
Yeah.
to show, look what we can do.
I think there was two things I remember most people commenting on. First, the fact that we refer to the staff as the crew.
Yep.
And we actually thought of them as the crew. There's a ship and the crew on board, and we're going somewhere, and everyone's got to play their role.
It takes everyone to get them get it going.
We're great at the nautical theme. We could take that as far as you'd like. The other one that people always commented on, almost without exception, was all the clapping. Constantly clapping, you know. People were constantly standing up in front of the room and sharing their stories.
People get motivated by positive acclaim and success, and so it was actually quite easy to get people motivated at Vangaurd, because it took a while to get the wheels spinning, but once you got the flywheel moving, it kept moving and improving, and it was pretty easy to get people on board in a winning organisation.
Yeah, and I think the key, as you mentioned before, is really understanding what our purpose is. You know, we all knew why we were there. Yeah. And what mission we were on. Yeah. So again, I see that, when I've gone out for the last 15 years post Vangaurd to work with all sorts of different organisations, organisations can talk about vision and strategy, but bringing that to life really takes that purpose. Yeah. So how did you see people growing, being raised in the organisation? Because I know that Vangaurd was very good at grow our own and create future leaders. Yeah. What were some of the things that you observed, experienced to make that happen?
Well, look, I think we were pretty good at inviting people to take on different roles and greater responsibility. So I think the organisation was very good at moving people around the organisation and growing their talents by giving them different challenges. And you were very helpful in helping me do that. But I'd learned that from my bosses in the US as well. And give people a challenge. It's amazing how often they respond to it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you giving me some of the credit there, but I must say it was something that absolutely I took from your leadership. I remember you trying to convince me to go into sales. You may recall it didn't work.
I think I was right.
And about 3 years into running my own business, I had that thought, perhaps Jeremy was right, this would have been a really good experience. But again, what I observed is that when leaders move around the organisation, they grow empathy. They understand all of the different parts and the pain that colleagues, sitting on the other side of the organisation are feeling. Yeah. So, that was my observation around how we collaborated to know
forming the team and getting people to work together is very important. So as you say, if people have empathy for other roles in the organisation, they're much more likely to collaborate well with other people.
Yeah, and then bringing that back to governance, I think when we understand one another's challenges, we can support each other to deliver on the outcomes that we need to. So, again, when you reflect on Mr. Bogle as, an absolute legend in the space who set out to do the right thing. I think he's the king of do the right thing in this sector. What would be the biggest lesson you've taken from him as a mentor and leader?
I mean, really passion for what he was doing. I mean, this guy was a guy who worked until his final dying days last year. He was almost 90 and he was still signing his latest copy of his book. But he had a tremendous concern for people, and that meant both the crew and the organisation, but mostly as well the clients. The clients came first.
Yes, I remember that very, very clearly, and was very lucky to have had the opportunity to sit one-to-one and share that with him.
Well, I always like to say that Paul Keating defined great leadership as a combination of imagination and courage, and Jack Bogle brought both imagination and great courage to the task.
Absolutely, dared to see it being done differently and made it happen. Jeremy, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I really do appreciate you taking the time. We're going to go on a short break, and when we come back, Glen Bartlett will be joining us.
This is Ticker. is Ticker.
From Ticker, this is Black Belt Leader. Here's Karen Gately.
Welcome back to Black Belt Leader. Joining us now is Glen Bartlett. Glen is our regular employment lawyer and is a recognised leading trainer in the areas of workplace, employment, law, human resources, investigations. Welcome back to the show, Glen.
Thanks, Karen.
Good to
Thanks
see
for having
you.
me. Yeah, great to see you again.
Today's topic, obviously, understanding, through your lens, what are some of the things organisations can be doing to make sure that that culture is driving governance. So clearly, I have no doubt in your role, you see time and time again behaviours that are clearly, holding the organisation back from living up to their duty of care, etc. What are some of the things you see most often?
Oh, look, Karen, I think to start with, really needs to start from the top in terms of board. Leading the way, your leaders leading the way in this space.
Yeah.
One of the things we see is a real lack of knowledge in this space. So we put our best operators, whether they are mining operators, paramedics, lawyers, accountants, in the leadership management positions, who actually don't give them the training education to understand the difference between performance and behaviour. The other thing is we see organisations that recruit for performance and reward performance, and sometimes, quite often, the worst behaviours coming from those strong performers.
And again, I see that
killer.
all the time as well. And the conversation I often have with leaders is we need to redefine performance to include behaviour. It's not just about the impact that you have on the results, and often it's the financial result that is being measured as the most valuable contribution. It's how you actually made that happen and your impact on the rest of the organisation.
And I think you touched on, on the systems there, performance reviews should be behaviour and performance
Absolutely.
reviews. The clarity around, quite often people can talk about the values of the organisation of trust, respect, teamwork, but it's where, the behaviour, what does trust mean in terms of behaviours? That's where the rubber hits the road.
Exactly.
And we're really talking about driving the right behaviours.
Yeah.
Behaviour is the same as conduct.
Yeah.
That's the thing about English. We're talking about managing misconduct.
That's right.
And there's a lot of work to be done from the top in organisations in terms of systems that support driving the right culture as well.
So how often do you see that, something's gone wrong? They've obviously got the lawyers involved for good reason. How often do you see that we've got values that we're espousing as opposed to actually living by and applying every day?
Pretty much every day, Karen. We just did
we're
working with clients all the time.
Yeah.
And even in doing reviews, we did one recently, spoke to everyone on site, very clear values, behaviours up on the wall.
Yes.
But when you
pretty
ask
poster.
people, what do you stand for, what are the values, what are the behaviours, pretty much nobody could tell us. So, they've got to be embedded. It's not, there's a whole lot of tiers, layers to this, but the language and being precise about it's important, and having your cultural champions across the whole organisation led by the board is fundamental.
I think that's a key point, because often when we're talking about culture-driven governance, we're looking to the leadership team. We're looking obviously to the CEO and the executive and other ranks of leader. But in my experience, the biggest influencer is in fact the board and their expectation of the CEO and their leadership team about what they make matter. So what's your advice to board members? How can they make sure, sitting from that table, that they are, again, influencing the appropriate approach?
Yeah. Well, I think to start with, Karen, being very clear, as a board, what you stand for, what your core values are, and the way you interact with each other. You live and breathe those values, the way you deal with your executive group. You walk the talk, in other words. If that's not happening, it's just not going to work.
And I had an example of that just last week, in fact, where I was observing a scenario where, the organisation's working really hard to create a culture of respect and accountability and engagement. The challenge is every time senior people or even others who are still, earlier in their careers go to a board meeting, they get essentially bullied. In terms of the behaviours that are projected. And clearly that makes it incredibly difficult to cascade that kind of culture through the organisation.
And walking the talk, and also the clarity. So if I said to you, Karen, okay, trust is going to be a core value, what do you mean by trust in terms of behaviours? You might say, look, it's being honest no matter what the consequences are. That's the behaviour that supports trust. And I might say, look, I understand that, but I think it's actually doing what you say you're going to do.
Yes.
And it might be both, but getting that clarity around those behaviours, there's quite a bit of scope, because those are the behaviours that need to be reinforced and embedded. And when there's a breach of behaviour, we're talking about managing misconduct. Is it a serious breach that will go down the investigation, potential serious misconduct path? or is it in the feedback world? And that's another thing, you know. We do a lot of work on training managers on a feedback framework, actually how to give feedback, the different curveballs that come up.
Yeah.
The practical doing it and having that framework and consistency across an organisation is paramount.
Absolutely agree.
It's a skill, again, that quite often we haven't taught a manager actually how do you do a performance review.
Yeah.
Or it should be a performance and behaviour review.
That's
How,
right.
how do you do the review?
That's
how do you
right.
give feedback?
That's right. Look,
Yeah.
I passionately agree with that.
Yeah.
You know, I would
Yeah.
say that in many instances, performance management doesn't work. It doesn't add value and actually creates pain in organisations. You know, the approach that we talk about is focusing first and foremost on the development of my character. Who am I as a human being? How am I thinking? How am I behaving?
Yeah.
How am I actually applying my talent? Because that's going to have the biggest impact, obviously, on the outcome. So what I'm hearing us really talk about is making the stuff matter, rather than just saying there's a beautiful poster and reception, everybody knows that that's how to do the right thing. It's then being clear to the point where people know what that looks like in action, leading by example, and then holding people to account to that.
And making a big decision. So this is where it's, you know, a big decision comes up.
Yeah.
Is this consistent with our core values? Mm-hmm. What's our purpose? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is this consistent with it? So, I mean, you might have seen at Melbourne Football Club, we've just recently put up our core values.
Yeah.
Put out there, and our purpose.
Yeah.
Purpose being, you know, making people proud to belong.
Yeah.
And core values being true, trust, respect, unity and excellence.
Excellent.
So the big decisions, will this make our people proud
Yes.
on this decision? Is it consistent with our values?
Yeah.
Too often decisions are made on talent, performance,
Exactly.
but we've got some real key data points.
Yeah.
And in any organisation, I'd encourage, if you haven't done that or you're not doing that, for boards and leaders to do it. It's really
needs to
important.
happen.
And there's a lot of exposure as well in terms of risks, a lot of litigation in this space. We see it all the time, every day, and quite often there just hasn't been the clarity in this space or the work done.
Yep. Absolutely agree. Again, as you pointed out, it's one thing to say, well, this is the word, this is the core value, but what does it actually mean? You know, and again, trust. What builds trust, as you said before, one of them might be honesty. In my experience, if you deliver honesty with an absence of respect and sensitivity, that erodes trust. You know, the brutal truth on its own.
They work together.
It's absolutely right. So again, making sure that we're educating leaders about how do we create that environment where people are choosing successful behaviour. Can you think of a time where, you know, again, organisations have espoused the values and really got caught out because at the end of the day they're not practicing what they preach?
Yeah, I can, Karen. It does require cultural change. Might take 3 to 5 years or longer, depending upon the size of your organisation. But thousands of employees, it might take a long time.
Yeah.
And so it requires a whole lot of cultural champions and being consistent and resilient. But at the end of the day, if all you care about is the bottom line and money, and these things don't really matter, it's going to break down. And so I've seen examples in that space. I've seen examples of high-performing individuals exhibiting the worst behaviours and they've been leaders. Right? And organisations too terrified to deal with them. But when they have, the actual productivity performance of the organisation's gone through the...
Seen it time and time again.
Yeah, so you've...
Absolutely agree.
So, but there's some real fundamentals, a lot of myths in this space. Feedback and strong feedback skills is really critical. And I'm not talking about feedback by text message or email or social media. I talk about the ear is receptive, the eye is sceptical. That's not the way to get the best results. And it's something that typically, not everywhere, but typically, employers haven't tooled up their managers and leaders in this space.
If I had a magic wand and could change one thing about leadership, it would be the ability to have that effective coaching conversation where we're able to deliver the truth with respect and sensitivity and inspire people to want to become a better version of themselves and step up to their potential because they're choosing to behave successfully. You know, again, time and time again, leaders, in my experience, are not having those conversations. They're observing behaviours. It's a bit problematic. They're not actually dealing with it. For example, the arrogant so-called top performer that's undermining the standards.
So the best organisations, the strongest cultures we've seen deal with those issues.
Totally.
And they're very strong in this space, and they actually reinforce and embed the right behaviours.
Absolutely.
And it just stands out. In fact, a lot of time, behaviours get dealt with, on the shop floor or not at the highest level, because it's so embedded in the very best organisations. But it does take, education, systems, tenacity and resilience and consistency.
And making it matter.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, applying it, regardless of who you are.
Correct.
Doesn't matter how much the revenue is that you are bringing in, how big your impact is on financial performance. If you can't play nicely, if you can't, act responsibly and have integrity, you can't be here.
Yeah, that's it.
Fabulous to have you on the show again. Do really appreciate it, and look forward to the next time when we have you on again soon.
Nice. Thanks, Karen. Great to be
That's
here.
all we have for the program today. As usual, if there are any topics you would like us to cover, please get in touch. More than happy to do that. Remember, you choose. Will you be an ordinary or an awesome leader of your people?
This is Ticker, your new source for news.